I had been in the workforce for 7 years and had absolutely zero success. I was heavily in debt. I hadn't made a lot of money. I hadn't made a sale. I had been fired 3 times. All of a sudden, I went from a failure for 7 years to basically setting every sales record, being promoted a bunch of times. Like, that was the start. That was the catalyst.
This is Justin Welsh. And after years of failure in sales, he rose to become a top player at ZocDoc. And then he scaled another startup to $70 million in revenue. Now he's one of LinkedIn's biggest personal brands, and he's done over $10 million in digital product sales.
That course made like 186 grand in 3 months. And I was like, why am I doing consulting and advising for healthcare companies when I can just create these courses?
In this episode, you'll learn Justin's exact frameworks for building teams that absolutely crush it.
If you screw up your first few hires in a SaaS business, you build this culture of mediocrity or kind of crappy performance. We built a culture of high performance from the get-go.
How you can sell anything to anyone by identifying the pain and becoming the solution.
We discovered the pain, we twisted the knife and made that pain existential. And then we delivered our solution as the only viable solution in the market to solve that pain.
And the steps Justin would take if he had to build the biggest personal brand on LinkedIn again from scratch.
I tried to write like I spoke. That's my biggest thing. And not worry about grammar or punctuation or anything perfect.
And if you really want how you can use sales and LinkedIn to sell millions of dollars of digital products with 0 employees.
That's a really, really valuable skill set. I saw a $2.5 million problem. I fixed a $2.5 million problem, and that got me paid.
I bet most people who listen to this will already know you, I think, but maybe to give maybe some of the highlights. So you run a solo business that focuses, generally speaking, on creators. Is probably like one of the most successful solo businesses ever. You just crossed $10 million of revenue, so congrats cumulatively.
Thank you.
A month ago-ish.
Thank you.
You're like the largest creator on LinkedIn. I don't know if you consider yourself a creator, but one of the largest personal brands on LinkedIn. And I really admire the way that you sell. I think it's very easy for people who sell any kind of information to get jumbled into info sellers. I think you've done a very good job of keeping it white education and white collar and really highbrow. I really admire the way that you write copy. And so I want to get into all that. I want to get into the sales you've done and the tactics. But you've talked about before, you kind of think of your life in certain acts. And I actually think people will learn a lot about you if we start actually quite early. And so I want to start with, you got banned from from McDonald's when you were pretty young. Tell me about that kid. Tell me about the early days. I want to start there.
Yeah, it's interesting. Little Nardwar interview action, which is really, really good nugget. I'm not sure if that's on the internet somewhere. I don't think I've ever said that before on the internet. So that's really interesting. Yeah, I was a pretty immature kid. As I think a lot of folks are, right? My dad dropped me off at Chesterland, Ohio McDonald's on July 11th of 1995, the day I turned 14, and said to get a job. So I became a cashier at McDonald's on my 14th birthday in the middle of nowhere, sort of farm town, Ohio. And I stole a blueberry muffin, an extra blueberry muffin during one of my breaks. So we were allowed a sandwich and a side. And I was a healthy little portly eater when I was young, and I wasn't done eating on my break. So I swiped a blueberry muffin, and my boss found out about it, and they fired me. And so my friend showed up and picked me up. I was 14 years old, mind you. And we drove around the parking lot, showing them the middle finger, which was, I look back, there's not much else to do in a small farm town in Ohio, to be just clear about that. But I was banned from going to the McDonald's in Chesterland, Ohio for maybe 8 months or a year. And as a 14-year-old, it's pretty destructive because that's what everyone does after the basketball games or football games. But I apologized. I went in. My dad suggested I go apologize. So I went in and apologized and made it right. And certainly wasn't the last dumb thing I did in my life, but maybe one of the first stupid things I did as an adult old enough to have a job at McDonald's.
I like that. Were you a rambunctious kid? Was that a one-off event? Or were you doing the 5-finger discount all over?
No, I was a pretty well-behaved kid. I went through a stint in my younger, around 7th or 8th grade, where I saw other quote unquote cool kids getting in trouble, and I thought that was the way to be popular or interesting. But for the most part, no, I was really pretty well behaved. I stayed out of trouble. My parents weren't stern, but they certainly would be disappointed if I was in trouble. And so, I for the most part kept my fingers and everything clean.
Yeah, fair. My first job was at Dairy Queen in Columbus, and
Nice.
I ate like there was just no end in sight. I mean, every McFlurry or whatever the things were called, that little Dairy Queen, dipping things were great. I like it. So you went to OSU for college, and then I think what's interesting is like before you did all this, you had a really amazing career in sales. But I was reading through the doc you sent me before this, and you told me that you didn't make a single sale in your entire career until ZocDoc. You were fired 3 times. Like, tell me about the beginning of your sales career.
Part of what I'm good at today is talking and writing and selling myself and things like that. And that was really important when I was younger. When I came out of OSU, I was an excellent interviewer, talker, salesperson, felt really comfortable and went to these career fairs and landed a job in pharmaceuticals. I think where I got really intimidated was with older decision makers when I showed up at doctors' offices. And pharma is not much of what I would call a sales job. It's more of an influence job, which is actually what I'm good at today and what I was very poor at back in the day. I was just really intimidated. I was 21 years old and talking to doctors who were in their 50s who went to medical school. And here I am suggesting how they ought to prescribe to their patients, which in retrospect sounds really silly. So I just felt uncomfortable, right? There was no need. I'm sure maybe I influenced some people, but I never collected a credit card. I didn't make any sales. I didn't sell any physical goods. And I did that for, I think, about 6 years. And then I transitioned into medical device sales. And since I wasn't very good at pharma, I had to take a step backwards and become what's called a territory associate, which means essentially I'm like an indentured servant to somebody who's been doing it for a long time. And I'm running the equipment all over the state of Michigan where I was living at the time and showing up early morning cases that my boss didn't want to cover and things like that. But my job was to sell disposables and capital equipment. And I sold zero. I was a lousy salesperson. So by the time I was 28 years old, I had been in the workforce for 7 years and had absolutely zero success. I was heavily in debt. I hadn't made a lot of money. I hadn't made a sale. I had been fired 3 times. That all kind of changed in 2009 when I found myself working for a company called ZocDoc, which was sort of the beginning of the second part of maybe my 3-act or I guess 4-act play at this time.
Yeah, and you worked either with a four guy Ryan, right? At ZocDoc,
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, sure is.
What was your relationship like with Ryan? Like, what did he teach you about sales?
Yeah, I don't know if you sent an email to my wife or something. This is really interesting. Ryan was great and is great. So Ryan Stam was my boss, and I remember moving to New York City and going through 3 days of kind of training that, at the time it was a young startup, like maybe 15. I think I was the 11th hire and maybe the 2nd or 3rd sales hire. And so there wasn't a formalized training program, right? It was here's how this stuff works and here's what you say when you talk to doctors. And so Ryan and I went out and did some calls together, and we went to 95 University Place, floor 3 in New York, and talked to an orthopedic surgeon named Salil Gupta. And I remember this was my 3rd or 4th call of the day, and Ryan let me talk. And I talked about it, and I asked good questions, and I did the pitch. And the guy's like, yeah, here's my credit card. I want to sign up. And I was like, holy cow. It was the first time I had ever made a sale. And I don't know, Ryan just kind of gave me this confidence. He was real silly. He's real goofy boss. He loved to play around with the people at the front desk and kind of take the tension away and get us back on a cold call, which I loved. And I became really good at sort of after copying him. But that was the start of my entire career. It was sort of that day. The city was right for me. It was high energy New York City. The people around me were absolutely brilliant. I loved the product. I used the product then, and I still use it to this day. And my own maturity level was increasing. And so the intersection of sort of those 4 things at one time kind of just it was like magic dust. All of a sudden I went from a failure for 7 years to basically setting every sales record, winning salesman of the quarter, being promoted a bunch of times. That was the start. That was the catalyst.
Yeah, there's University Place is right over here. I'm over in Union Square area, so that's a fun.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's right where I was. Yeah.
Yeah. One of my maybe the 2nd or the 3rd. I used to work at BCG, one of these consultancies.
Yeah.
And I used to work with this guy Jim Brennan, who's this amazing partner. And he to me sounds a lot like Ryan. Like I remember he sold this like multi-million-dollar project to Carlisle, and he sold it with one slide. There was no big pitch deck, no giant, SLA. He just knew how to work the room. It was incredible.
Yep.
And I was like, oh man, shit, I want to be that guy. Like I want to have that life. It was like being on stage when you were around him. Was Ryan kind of like that, or what was Ryan like?
Yeah. Yeah. But both Ryan and the CEO Cyrus, right? So like, I became like a wind up doll after that. So you kind of like wound me up, and I kind of felt I had this confidence, right? And I think where Ryan was really good is Ryan and Cyrus were both very different. Ryan at the time was the director of sales. He still works there to this day. Cyrus was the CEO at the time, and Ryan was kind of this guy where as I got more into the company, they moved me to San Francisco and Boston, and they moved me to LA, and they moved me to all these different markets to open these markets and kind of hire teams and establish ZocDoc on the ground in these different cities. And where I really relied on Ryan was like Ryan could re-energize me. So I can recall a very specific point where I was in San Francisco. I'd come from New York to San Francisco, a lot slower, a lot longer lunches for the doctors, less energy, great town, just different vibe. And like I got into this funk. And I remember just calling Ryan and being like, yo, I'm in a funk. And he's like, I'll be on the next plane. Flew out, like got me re-energized, got me feeling good again. And like that's what Ryan was really, really good at. Cyrus, on the other hand, was good at some different stuff. Like I can recall after starting to set some of these records, this was real early on, like maybe month 2 or 3, it became obvious that I was going to be good at this job. And I walked into work one morning, and I don't know if I've told this story ever before, but like I was really tired one morning. And Cyrus said, hey, you're tired. What's going on? And I was like, oh, I just moved into a 66 and a half square foot room in East Village at East 13th and 2nd Avenue. And I was sleeping on this futon, which essentially a single bed that was a futon. And I said, oh, I'm sleeping on this like uncomfortable futon. So I'm just a little sleepy. He's like, no, can't have that. Absolutely not. Can't have our best sales guy tired. You got to show up sharp. Here's a check. And he like ripped out this check, pulled out this checkbook, ripped out a check and said, here's a check. It's a blank check. I want you to go down to Sleepy's, which I think at the time, I don't think it's any longer there. I think it's 14th and 2nd or 14th and 3rd. He's like, go down to Sleepy's and find the nicest mattress that will fit in your room and buy it. Just write, I signed the check and everything. He's like, just write the amount in when you get there. And I was like, oh, damn. And so I like went down to Sleepy's, and I think I spent like $987 on a single mattress. Like when this is 2009, which is pretty high end. And like, to me, it was the nicest thing anyone had ever done for me. And for him, it was 900. It was a rounding error. It was a business write-off, right? And I always learned that lesson and brought that lesson to when I eventually became an executive, because like the smallest things you do for people keep your top performers around. And that was an early lesson I learned working there.
I love that. That's incredible. That reminds me, I don't know if this story is true or not, but it floats around that like Steve Jobs, anytime he wanted to recruit people, he'd bring them into the office, and let's say somebody didn't live in California. No worries. You want an apartment? Cool. We're gonna get you an apartment. All your stuff is all trapped in Ohio. Cool. We're gonna have somebody bring all your stuff. Don't worry about it. Oh, you don't have a car? Cool. We're gonna rent your car. And it's just like how do we support you and like make everything you do as easy as possible, right? So that you can focus on like the matter at hand. I think that's a really incredible. I love that. I love that philosophy.
That's exactly what happened to me. Like after that incident, they moved me to San Francisco, they moved me to Boston, they moved me to Los Angeles. And they said, moving forward, as long as you're going around the country doing this role for us, which if you ever watch like Pulp Fiction, I can't remember Harvey Keitel's character name, but like essentially my role was like the fix-it guy. They deployed me to different markets that were broken. I generally laid folks off, unfortunately, and rehired the team and reestablished the strategy. And like as long as you do that, they said we'll pay for your apartment, we'll pay for your car, we'll pay for your car insurance, we'll pay for your gas. And so I was making a full-time salary and commission plus every piece of my living expenses minus going out was taken care of. It's actually how I dug myself out of credit card debt, was by turning into this character that they could deploy across the country and leveraging that for having my living expenses paid for.
Yeah, you're like the secret weapon. How much do you think you saved during that period?
A lot. I mean, not like a lot, I guess, in today's money, but like I paid off 25 or 30 grand worth of credit card debt.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
How would they have described you? Because to me, like going from like not selling anything to now like star sales player. But part of it sounds like confidence. Like you had somebody who was there to give you energy, to re-energize you. But there's got to be like tactics. There's got to be things you picked out from them that you started doing. Like what was the change?
I guess if I think about it, there was probably a few shifts. One was like an incredible, just total 180 on a mindset shift. Like at one point in my life, I just thought, I can't do anything. I suck at this. I'm terrible at this job. I'm never going to be good at this job. Self-defeating, right? We all know where like a self-defeating attitude leads. And as soon as I figured out how to sell at ZocDoc, and then like I went to my first market and let go some of the team members, found that I could hire really effectively, found that I could teach people the strategy of going out and selling, like that became a total 180 from a mindset and confidence perspective. And clearly that's the most important thing. I think the second thing is that like, this was the first time in my life that I took a craft very seriously. So when I was in those earlier jobs where I was getting fired, there were only two things that were important to me: working out and going on dates. Those are the only things I cared about. And those were pretty well tied together. The more I worked out, the more dates I went on, right? And so that was like what I cared about. And for the first time, like I was making good money. I was establishing myself internally as a guy who could fix problems. And like I started to think about that more effectively. Like instead of thinking about working out or going on, I was thinking about my career, right? Okay, I'm building this internal brand. I'm this sort of not intrapreneur, I guess, but I have this really effective internal brand that I'm building. And I became hyper obsessed with this idea that if you could deploy me anywhere in the business, I could figure out the problem. And what I started to learn is that that's a really, really valuable skill set. Because when people think about your intrinsics first, like, oh man, Justin's just really good at problem solving, instead of Justin's really good at sales or marketing or closing or prospecting, like problem solving gets you paid more, right? If there's a $50 million problem in the business and you're the guy that can figure it out, that's worth way more than anything you can do mostly in SMB sales or early stage SaaS sales at that company. So like what I started to do was care about what are the frameworks and formulas that I'm learning as I'm fixing these problems? How do I make this system repeatable? How do I turn this into something where when you deploy me into a new part of the business and it's something I've never seen before for the very first time, like, can I lean on my process and my system and get similar results? And so what I started to do was put together what I thought of, I guess, back then as a playbook. And that's where things became more systematized. And that's where like I saw a $2.5 million problem, I fixed a $2.5 million problem, and that got me paid. And so that was the start of sort of my career trajectory, was mindset flip, and then really taking myself seriously.
I think people love to like hate on like generalists, like, oh, you're not specialized in anything, like you don't have this like concrete skill set. But consulting actually is quite good at that, like teaching people to be like strong generalists. And when I think about like buddies of mine that I think are awesome, that I would always invest in, like there's this guy who like had a fantastic e-com company when he was like 21, 22, sold it, did like a consumer SaaS, like a mobile app, $0 to $1 million of ARR in like a year. And then now is doing like B2B SaaS. And again, like $0 to $1 million, like very, very quickly. And I just think about that. And I'm like, oh man, like that's the kind of person who can just figure out anything. Like I would bet on that person no matter what. I think that's a really important quality to have in somebody.
Agree.
Yeah. It sounds like everything was going pretty amazingly. Why leave?
Yeah. Great question. So I have like this not personality problem. Maybe that's the best way to describe it, is like a personality problem where I get really bored with mastery. And that initial statement might sound arrogant. I don't think it is. And I'm trying not to make it sound that way. But like most people want to work at something until they master it and then spend the rest of their lives living in that space of mastery. I felt like I had mastered the roles that I was in at ZocDoc. Like they were predictable, they worked well, and I wanted a new challenge. Like I liked ZocDoc when it was like me and like 3 buddies of mine as the sales guys and like 11 other people or whatever it was. And by this time, the company was 750 people big. It had $1 billion plus valuation. It had raised 300 million in venture capital. Like it was a big business, one of the bigger startups in New York. This was back in 2013 or 14. And one of my reps had gone to a small startup called Patient Pop over in Los Angeles, and they were looking for their VP of sales. And the CEOs there, Luke and Travis, had interviewed like 30 people at ZocDoc. And they had asked them if we could get one guy to come be our VP of sales, who would that guy be? And like 90% of them brought my name up, which is, first of all, very humbling. And really, I appreciate all those folks for kind of putting me high up on the list. And so they came at me really, really hard. And they told me essentially that if I was going to make the leap into an executive role, I was only 32 or 33 at the time, that I have sort of carte blanche to do a lot of the things that I wanted to do. And to bring some of the process that I just described and some of the playbooks into their organization. And not only would I be able to do that in the sales organization, but since I had become a problem solver sort of cross-departmentally, I'd be able to do some of those things in marketing and customer service. And that to me sounded really exceptional because I was doing it at a much lower level at ZocDoc. I wasn't a VP. I wasn't a C-suite. I was just sort of this, guy who didn't really have much of a title. And so
you were the Terminator.
You were. Yeah. It was. I can never think of Harvey Keitel's name in that movie, but he's like the Fixer or the Rat or something. I forget. But and so I saw this opportunity to say to myself, okay, if you're going to go be a VP, like most VPs of sales are laid off within 16 months. That's the average tenure of an early stage VP of sales. And like this is same customer call point, similar product, similar pitch. Like this is my one chance to nail it and to not be the 16-month guy and to get a lot of carte blanche to do what I wanted. And so I took that leap. And on January of 2015, I became a VP of sales at Patient Pop at 33 years old.
What was that like? And I want to ask that in a certain way. So like I not to keep like bringing it back, but when I was a consultant, I left and I ran this big mobile app portfolio. It was like $20 million of revenue, super different from consulting. It was executional. I got to do marketing, product. I talked to engineers. The first time I'd done that. And they just handed me $20 million of revenue. We're like, here we go. I loved that. I also hated it because I just felt like there was just so much to do. And I'm glad it happened. I think I was probably given that responsibility earlier than I probably should have had it. And that it worked out fantastically, in the long run. But, God, I mean, it was tough, like the first year. Did you have a similar experience? What was it like for you?
I did not, to be very honest. Like my experience became much tougher in years 4 and 5. Year 1 was kind of my most joyous year. So I came into year 1, and one thing that I've taken away from that first year in sort of those roles at ZocDoc and Patient Pop and what I use today is like simplicity often beats complexity. When there are a lot of things going on at the same time and you have a lot of different things you could do or directions that you could go or things that you could tinker with, generally the simplest and most obvious stuff is what matters. So I thought to myself as I entered this company, I only had one salesperson max. I thought, okay, if I'm going to build this sales organization effectively, I need a few things. Number one, we need to understand the pitch. Like, what are the pains the doctors are feeling? Why do they buy a solution like this? What are they trying to solve? Like, what are the money problems? What are the personal problems? Like, what's the urgency behind that? Just got to figure all that out. What's the story that we're going to tell to map to sort of the customer pain? So the very first thing that I did was sit down with the pitch deck and just sort of rip it apart and then learn to tell a story where we discovered the pain, we twisted the knife and made that pain existential, and then we delivered our solution as the only viable solution in the market to solve that pain. That was sort of part number one. Once I had that lined up, Max was already a good salesman. He had worked for me at ZocDoc. I knew how good he was. I was out selling. I knew that I could sell the product. So the next thing I thought is, okay, cool. We've got a good pitch. We've got a good deck. Like, we've got a good strategy. We know what the go-to-market is. It's right now. It's just knocking on doors of people who have bought other software platforms. They're most likely to buy another one. And so I just needed to hire more people to do that. So that's where like my networking skills came in. I went back to folks who had left ZocDoc and been top performers at ZocDoc and other companies and made them offers, right? And sold the vision and sold the story as I would, to a doctor. And so I was able to get 5 or 6 really, really high quality salespeople off the bat. And that momentum, number one, was of course excellent when you're growing really quickly, but that culture I think is really critical. If you screw up your first few hires in a SaaS business, you build this culture of mediocrity or kind of crappy performance. We built a culture of high performance from the get-go, and I brought a lot of what a lot of people might have called toxic over from ZocDoc, which was like we worked hard, we worked long, we made a lot of calls, like we pushed it, and that was the environment that I had come from. But those were sort of the important things that we did early on. And to be frank, when you hire top performers, lots of them love intense cultures. And so I wanted to create a culture of intensity and high performance, and that's what we did.
I like that. So there was kind of like the the product might be different, right? Whether you're pitching like somebody to join you on your team or you're pitching the doctor, but like the process is the same. Like figure out people's dream outcomes, like understand their problems, position the product to that. That's like one thing I'm thinking about and taking away. And the other thing is, and so it's like you acquired like relationships in your early career that were really strong. And so you can just kind of take that team and bring them with you to your future roles. And that sounded like it made you go a lot faster. Is that fair?
Yeah, it made me go a lot faster. And like, again, like I have a framework for everything. Like whether I'm pitching a doctor or pitching an employee, it's like find the pain, amplify the pain, tell them a story about how you solved it, show them a transformation, make them an offer, and ask them for a response. Like if you do those 6 things right in a row, you're likely going to close both doctors and new hires. And if you do it really effectively, like we had a lot of slam dunk employees and a lot of slam dunk physicians come on board early on.
I like that. You I don't think you would have wanted to be a consultant, but you would have been a really badass consultant.
Thanks. Thanks, man.
So the first couple of years were really good. Things weren't as great after that, is my understanding.
Yeah. And it's not that they weren't as great. It's that things changed, right? So like, and by the way, as they should, like the company grows, you need more people, you need more positions, you take on more responsibility. So when I was hired on in 2015, I was the VP of sales, but I was functioning more as a VP and a manager, right? So I was the person representing the sales department in the executive meetings, but I was also making sure that we were hitting our targets from a managerial perspective. And then pretty soon I hired managers or promoted folks into management. And then pretty soon I had directors. And then I eventually had VPs underneath me and became the chief revenue officer. And so I went from 1 or 2 sales guys to 150 people on the sales team and, 15, 20 managers and 10 directors and 3 VPs or something like that. I don't remember the exact number. When that happens, your role becomes distinctly different, right? Than sort of being a quasi VP and manager. You're more systems oriented. You're more strategic and strategy oriented. And so I was really good at those things until a certain point. So I was good at those to 10 million, 15 million, 20 million, 30 million. I felt really at ease growing the business. As we crossed 35 to 40 million, what got you there will no longer get you to where you're going. And I believe in a vacuum that I'm talented and smart enough to figure out how to get to 50 or 70, or we ultimately ended up getting to 70. It was not an easy slog. But like, I think I could do 100 or 150 or 200, which would make me, almost revenue, milestone agnostic, which is uncommon in the revenue leadership world. Most guys are good 1 to 10 or 0 to 1 or 10 to 50. And I think that I could be good up to 100. The problem was I didn't have the opportunity to learn those things or to get better at those things in a vacuum, as of course I didn't. Like there was chaos all around all the time. And so the way that I describe that to folks is, if you've ever played Tetris, I know it's not exactly the most topical reference in the world, but if you've ever played Tetris, you keep going and you keep going, you think I'm getting pretty good at this. And then pretty soon the pieces start to fall really fast. And then as the pieces fall really fast, they stack up really quickly and you're trying to move them around, but like, it's just you're drowning, right? And so at one point, I just started to feel like I was drowning. And at the same time, I was also reaching that 5-year mark. So I was less interested in what I was doing. And I think the combination of those two things was sort of a recipe for suggesting that it was time for me to do something different.
Yeah, like let's say that there weren't as many things going on. I mean, would you have even wanted to? Do you get energy from like the kind of company that is going more enterprise? The $50 to $100 million size.
No, I don't. Okay. I prefer 0 to 10. Like if I quit what I was doing today and you asked me what would I be really good at doing for the next 20 years, it would be finding startups in a space that I'm familiar with. And like, do you want to go from 0 to 10? Like, I will show you how to do that. And just doing that over and over and over again until they find someone who's like the efficiency guy who wants to like pull levers and make the business 1% and 2% better. I'm not super interested in that. I'm more interested in when everything is broken or nothing is figured out. I love that part.
Yeah, my favorite projects and like the whole consulting thing were like the working with private equity companies, or we occasionally worked with a couple of startups who were like friends of partners. And I hated the giant payments platform with 2,000 people. You got to have a fucking meeting with like 30 people,
Sucks.
Get everybody corralled around this one decision. And guys, it was just so much. It was so much project management. Tell me about, there was a breaking point at some point.
Yeah.
Right. What caused that? What was that like?
Yeah, a lot of things caused that. So as the Tetris game, as the pieces fell faster, you start to compensate for that in ways that you probably wouldn't normally compensate for problems in your life. So, for example, I've always been, as I mentioned, I've always been someone who exercises a lot. So to this day, I still walk total between 8 and 10 miles a day. I usually get 5 or 6 in the treadmill in the morning. So I stopped exercising because I just found I tried to cram more work into the day. So I didn't feel like I could give myself sort of that 90 minutes or that 60 minutes in the morning that I needed. So I stopped exercising, started eating more, started drinking more, and did anything really to sort of numb the pain of not being able to figure out the job, right? Or figure out even what was next for my career. At this point, I felt a little bit lost, and I had been someone who was very used to being in control. And I am a control freak. I'm very, very much a control freak. And so this felt out of control. And I don't remember exactly the day. I think it was December 16th. Of 2018, or maybe it was December 19th, but it was a Saturday, is what I remember, how I recall this memory. And woke up to go out to brunch. Woke up and did my thing, and then when my wife and I were going out to brunch, and as we were driving to brunch, she was like, "Hey," I said, "Hey, I'm not feeling well. I'm feeling a little panicky here. I'm feeling a little bit of anxiety." And so she drove me home, and my fingers started to get kind of tingly at the edge of your fingertips. And anyone who's had a panic attack, I didn't know what was happening, but I think anyone I'm describing this to who's had a panic attack before would kind of know what's coming next. And that was my very first panic attack. And I had always assumed that panic attacks just might feel like a lot of anxiety, but I don't know if this was a bad one. I've had a couple since, but it was really intense. I definitely thought I was dying. I definitely was hallucinating and seeing a lot of people and hearing a lot of sounds and screaming my head off, gripping we were in Culver City, in LA, and just screaming like a crazy person. And my wife was scared, right? She didn't really know what was going on. So she called 911, and they came over. And they took my shirt off and put all these electrodes on me and was like, "Hey, you're not dying." And I think at that point, it helped me calm down a little bit. But I was probably in bed for a good 2 days after that, or maybe a day and a half. And I thought, boy, something's got to change here. And so it was a good rock bottom for me. I cut alcohol the next day. I went 90 days in a row, no alcohol, started walking 10 miles a day with my wife. We did 3 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon, 3 in the evening, or 3.3, and had this little loop around our neighborhood. I started eating healthier, and I was at 225 when that happened. And I went down to 175. I lost 50 pounds in the next 90 to 120 days, which of course is too fast, and have since put a few back on, but it certainly helped me turn around at least the mental and physical part of that journey.
Yeah, I found so one thing that's true. I found of a lot of people, it's true of myself, it's true of friends, is you have these the breaking points are bad, and people run into them, but there's this kind of there's almost this slingshot where some of your shittiest, your darkest moments can turn into really wonderful things, because they it's I can't go any further down this path, rather than what people may typically do. If you're not pushed all the way, as you make small changes, you make incremental changes on the margin. But these kind of periods, I think, cause people to go, all right, I need to actually completely rethink, right, the way that I'm thinking. I need to make a drastic change, right? Mm-hmm. It's only through these kind of drastic changes, I think, where people get drastically different outcomes. What were the first big changes that you committed to after that day?
No alcohol, adding the workouts in, eating much healthier, just make this commitment to being I'm kind of like a binary thinker. I'm not great at I'm going to have a cheat day, or, I'm just not good at that. Just not my thinking just doesn't work really well that way. And so I just quit everything. I was no booze, no unhealthy food, no days of missed exercise. I went 180 degrees the opposite direction. And that got me to where I needed to be. And then I went and had a conversation with my CEOs and basically said I just didn't think I could make it. I just didn't think that even with these changes, I was burning out really, really badly. And I just didn't think I could make it. And so I said I wanted to leave, and they asked me to stay, and they asked me to stay for, I think, 3 or 4 months. I ended up staying 8 months, which was easier because I had gotten myself back into shape and things like that and was feeling less pressure. And of course, when you announce like you're leaving, like, human nature is to take things with more of a grain of salt than you might if you're not. But I also care a lot about the business, and I care about those guys to this day. And so like I wasn't going to slack. So I made sure we hit all of our targets. I made sure I played a crucial role in hiring my replacement, like all those different things. And then, I didn't know what to do with myself. I thought I was going to take a little break and go back and do the same ride all over again. But I just had this like inkling that if I was going to make a little money during my sabbatical or downtime or whatever it was in between jobs, that people would need to know who I was and what I had done there and what I had done at ZocDoc. So that was sort of the impetus for me starting to write on social media about what I had accomplished in my career. And I was afraid to write on, at the time, what was called Twitter, right? And like, I thought people were mean and shitty there, and they are and still are. But I thought LinkedIn seemed like a really obvious place to like write about my career because there were other folks that might hire me or CEOs or, people that I could network with. And so in late 2018, before I left Patient Pop in mid 2019, I started writing on social media.
I forgot this about you until recently. Like you had, I don't even remember. You might like it was something big, something 300, 400,000 followers, something very big on content that was totally not related to solopreneurship. It was related to your industry and sales.
Correct.
What was there a moment where that really started? Did it take off right away?
No.
Did you have to spend time like learning the craft of like copywriting? Like what did that look like?
Yeah, I did. It did not take off right away. No, I wrote for like 6 or 8 months with almost nothing, and then I wrote this post about getting fired 3 times, right? Like that was I told the story that I told in the beginning of this podcast through copywriting. And like, I didn't know how to write. I wouldn't have considered and still almost don't consider myself really a writer, even though I write 3 newsletters a week and 30 pieces of content.
Who were your inspirations? Like who did you look at when you thought, amazing, if I could write like that?
I didn't, it's a really good question, but like I didn't and still don't to this day consume much content on social media. Like I just don't have a lot. Like at the time, I've liked certain people's content over time. Daniel Vassallo, Dan Coe comes to mind. Like there are Chris Johnson. There are certain people who come to mind when I think of people whose content has made me think or entertained me or things like that. But I didn't know what to do other than buy a book. And so like I went on Amazon and looked at and like typed in, I don't remember exactly, but something like social media writing, right? And like there was this book that came up called The Copywriter's Bible by Josh Fechter. And if you look at that, you'll cringe today because he's sort of the original broetry, one line at a time style writer. But to me, that was brand new. I didn't know if that was cringy. I didn't know if that was silly. I didn't know if that was awesome. I just knew that he seemed to have a following. And so I bought this book, and the way that the book worked is it showed you something he wrote on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook, and then broke it down. Why did it work? Right. And so I just read it and studied it. And then I was like, okay, cool. The only way I'm going to get good at this is like if I try writing. And so I tried writing. And if you look back all the way to 2018, you'll find lots of hashtags and emojis and all the things that you would never see today. Right. But like I find that when I go back and look at Naval's writing, right? I wrote about that once, and he wrote back and said, like, I was still trying to figure it out, right? Like we're all not the cool, hip, philosophical writers we get to be over time. We all start somewhere. And so I just used what I had learned in that book. I tried to find my own style. I tried to write like I spoke. That's my biggest thing, and not worry about grammar or punctuation or anything perfect. And so I also had good timing. It was like me and Gary Vaynerchuk writing on LinkedIn at the same time. Like that was it. And so I got lucky in terms of timing as well.
Did you have any like communities or groups early on? So like I know like I think like Jesse Pujji and Sean are in some chats together, and like Sahil and Sam I think are in there. Like was there any of that in the early days?
No. I mean that would come eventually, right? Like as I grew a following of like 300,000 or 400,000 followers, like some of the big guys who are mostly on Twitter would reach out to me and they're like, hey, I want to figure out LinkedIn. Like, can you teach me? And I'll teach you how Twitter works and all this stuff. And we'll exchange, information, whatever. And that was super helpful on kind of accelerating growth or like shortcutting some of the lessons that I would have had to learn myself. But no, like there wasn't anybody else writing. There was like maybe one other guy, and it very kind of humorously, that guy's name was Kevin Dorsey in the sales world. And he worked for me. Like I hired him because of his brand. And so the two biggest, like, and I don't like to use this word, but I'll use it because people understand what it means. The two biggest quote unquote sales influencers at the time worked for the same company. So I was the CRO and Kevin was my VP of inside sales. So we used our brand to go out and hire incredibly talented people. And like that became what I initially did my first talk on at SaaStr, a big, huge SaaS event around how do you build a culture? And part of that culture was what Kevin and I did through LinkedIn.
I love that. So you're the granddaddy of sales content, basically.
I mean, I don't know about that,
LinkedIn.
but like I certainly was one of the first guys to write consistently about it on LinkedIn. And I didn't know how to write, and I probably still don't, but I'm certainly like to think that I'm better than I am. I was 6 years ago or 7.
I think you're pretty good. Yeah.
Thanks, man.
So you start to productize some of what's worked really well for you, right? How to write and grow on LinkedIn, and you launched the Creator MBA. I want to dig into the Creator MBA stuff like that. That's really exciting me. But can you maybe give people like what's your product ladder?
Yeah. I don't really have a great one. Like, to be honest, I think it's important to give some just quick backstory and context, which was I wrote on LinkedIn because I wanted to find consulting opportunities when I left Patient Pop. And that's what I did. I used that following early on to land consulting and advising opportunities. The pivot into more of the, I guess, what you know me for today was as I was looking at all the questions I was being asked on direct message on LinkedIn, there were a lot about sales. How do you run sales teams? How do you grow? How do you go to market? How do you work with marketing? How do you do discovery? All this kind of stuff. But there was also like a significantly larger amount of DMs around how are you growing on LinkedIn? How'd you learn to write? Why is your following growing so fast? And so even though I was a healthcare consultant, I decided to release the LinkedIn operating system, which was like, or the LinkedIn playbook first back in the day. And was like, I made this piddlywink $50 course and I sold 75 grand worth of it in 18 months. And then people loved it because it was only $50 and it was like $5,000 of value. And so when I remade that into the LinkedIn operating system and charged $150, that course made like 186 grand in 3 months. And I was like, why am I doing consulting and advising for healthcare companies when I can just create these courses, right? And sell my knowledge and use the content to drive the sales. And so I stopped consulting and advising, and I essentially built 2 small courses, the LinkedIn operating system and the content operating system. One's on how you use LinkedIn, one's on how I process 30 pieces of content a week. And then eventually, as I grew and grew and grew and grew, I became known as this guy who was doing this all as one person. I have no employees. My wife helps me, but I have nobody really helping me at all, except for people I'll outsource my web design or I'll outsource some launch help or something like that. And so solopreneurship is what I became known for. And then I used all this trust I had built selling these lower cost courses to eventually create a flagship course called the Creator MBA. And that one was priced at more of a high ticket price, around $897. And so that's my ladder, is like, you buy one of these smaller courses to figure out how to grow your audience. It works, you grow your audience, and now you want to figure out how to monetize that audience. So you buy the Creator MBA. That's the simple value ladder that I have through my business.
Yeah, I like that. That's a lot of how we thought about, we did Jesse Pucci's launch for Bootstrap Giants. And like the first thing we sold was this, there's like a $47, blueprint for sales. And maybe 60 or 70% of the people who ascended to the $5,000 product bought that product first. And like the whole goal, the goal was not to make money with the $47 product. It was like, cool, how do we do something for $50 that like people would email us? We sent it to a bunch of people, and we were like, how much, Andrew Waters, this guy's partner with Jesse. So Jesse was like, how much do you think Andrew's going to tell me to price this? And everybody wrote in, $500, $1,000, $2,000. And so it became this whole thing when we did it for 50. It's like, how do we just 10x, 100x, the feeling of the value versus what we charge?
Same.
And then like for the people who are ready for the higher ticket thing, right? They understand that they're bought in at that point. I think that's a really good, frankly, I think it's a very good way to do business. And it's a good sales tactic, but it's a good way to run your business.
And the way that I look at it is the sales that I make on the 2 lower courses almost like covers my quote unquote costs. It's like a $0 customer acquisition cost, because I think of it as paying for my time. So those are my salaries, right? Those pay my salary. And then the Creator.
And how much you've done 10 million cumulatively? How much is from those 2 lower ticket?
Probably around 6 million. So those pay like my goal was like make $1 million a year, pay myself that salary. I've been doing this for 6 years. Those probably made about $6 million. And then the Creator MBA and everything else is almost like the bonus and the cream on top. And so that's how I think about it. But that's changing, right? Like AI is commoditizing knowledge and people don't necessarily want to learn. They just want something to do it for them. So like, I think that makes selling knowledge products harder nowadays. And I think that, if this is something that I want to do for the next 5 years, which again is a giant question mark, is how do I do that? What's the right model? How do you continue to thrive in the face of AI, commoditizing lots of things like writing and art and knowledge and things like that? So those are things that I'm, thinking through as this business changes.
Yeah, that initial launch of Creator MBA, tell me about that. So I don't know Brennan Dunn super well. We email back and forth every once in a while, but I love his stuff. And he's got this whole, I want to walk through that playbook because you guys made very specific decisions, doing like an open cart, closed cart, doing this behind the scenes, your email, specific decisions that I think if you're just doing your first sale, you don't even know what's on the menu. You don't even know to think about these things. But when you're experienced, you do and you use them quite well. Tell me about that process.
Before I decided to launch Creator MBA, I decided to launch a newsletter back in, it would be 2022, I think. Wow. I think that's right. So I launched this newsletter on ConvertKit called the Saturday Solopreneur, and I didn't know how to use ConvertKit. And so there was no ChatGPT at the time. I couldn't just be like, how do I use ConvertKit, or give me a one pager? And so I went and I did some searching around how to use ConvertKit, and I found Brennan Dunn, and he had this course, Mastering ConvertKit, for $1,000. I bought it. I pressed play, and it was like, hi, I'm Brennan Dunn. Over the next 20 hours, and I'm like, pause. And so I was like, all right, I'm not going to watch 20 hours worth of stuff. And so I reached out to him and I was like, hey, dude, do you do like half day or full day consulting sessions? I want to start segmenting my audience so that I know what they want, right? Like, what do they want to buy? What are their problems? Where are they? Do they have a job? Do they have a side hustle? Like, how much money do they make? What's keeping them up at night? All this kind of stuff. And I was like, can you do a half day consulting session with me? He's like, yeah, here's how much it costs. So we jump on the Zoom, and I've got him for 4 hours. And in the first 30 minutes, he takes me through all this stuff. And I was like, pause. I was like, all right, I'm going through your value ladder really quickly, dude. I was like, how much for you to just do all this for me? Like, set up the survey, think of the questions, will you be my partner in doing this? And he was like, yes, right? Because Right Message, his tool, first of all, adopted by nearly every big creator now. I think I was one of the first guys to kind of get in there along with Ali Abdal and Tiago Forte and a couple other folks. But I was like, let's do this as a partner. So I flew to London. He lives up in a small town in the UK, about an hour north of London by bullet train, and went to his house. And we just spent like 2 days and laid out like, all right, what's the right information that we need to collect in order to have really good segments and really good personalization. We built that together, deployed that, and then I started growing my email list. I collected like something like 400 or 500 or some thousand pieces of data across my audience. And not only could I look at each individual audience member and bucket them as a certain persona, but I could learn really tactical things about them, really granular level details. And then overall, holistically, I could look across my audience and say, this is what my audience looks like, and this is their pain points and their problems and what keeps them up at night and things like that. So when it came to launch the Creator MBA, I called Brennan and said, let's work on this together. And we sat down and thought, what would a great launch look like? And to me, a launch would be really transparent, i.e., 18 weeks, I'm going to literally lay out everything you're going to get, handle all your objections, tell you all the different prices, tell you who it's for, who it's not for, who I think it works best for and works least, well for, so on and so forth. So we scoped out this 18-week email cadence, which we wrote together. And then what we did is we collected even more granular data that was relevant to the Creator MBA. And as we collected that data up front, each of the emails subsequently became more and more personalized using liquid code. So if you said, I'm a coach, I make $100,000 and I run my business through LinkedIn, the next email you get is like, a lot of coaches who make $100,000 through LinkedIn are asking me how the Creator MBA is going to help their coaching business. Let me show you. And then it's like very, very personalized and specific. And then when they went to the landing page is like, how to grow your coaching business from 100K to 250K using LinkedIn in 2025, right? It's very specific.
And is it fair? So yeah, my understanding was kind of that like there were a couple getting the data is like the really hard part, because you were also getting the data after the fact, and you're always, I think you asked like 7 or 8 questions in your sign up flow. So if you've got like 400,000 data points or something, let's say there's maybe 40 or 50,000 people, out of the 175 who like go through that and complete that, which is actually really high. For most people, it'll be like 5% or something if you don't collect it when somebody signs up. So that's like thing one. And then you're using that to do this personalization. And my understanding is there were just a couple points of personalization that were very high leverage. So when you talk about like calling out the coach, calling out their income, it's like the first couple sentences of the email, and it's the headline of the sales page. And that's 80% of the lift. Is that fair?
That's it. Like our thought process was, when someone opened up the email, in the first 5 seconds, they should be like, oh, this email is specifically for me. Right. And when they go to the landing page, they should say this header and subheader speaks specifically to me. And then, down in the email, there was often like a reframing of the very specific challenges they told us about to let us know how we could solve those. But for the most part, let's call it 95% of the emails were the same and 5% were personalized. But the lift that we saw from that was pretty incredible.
I love that. Yeah, I was looking at some of the numbers from Don. You've got like, so you would have done, I think, something around $1 million in
about 900 and some thousand. Yeah.
In 5 days as well, which is also this other crazy thing. You do 1.6. And so there's all these amazing lift metrics that you're able, because you A/B tested this thing that you guys can point to. So you went from like an 8.7 purchase rate on the sales page to a 12% purchase rate, which is like something like a 30 or 40% increase. I mean, it's a gigantic increase there. I think you get like, 1.5% of your list to convert, which is quite high for a product that's higher ticket like that. It was, how much was it? It was like $900, $700, something like that.
It was a $400 package, a 800 and a 6,000. Yeah.
Okay. That's right. Okay. Yeah.
Something like that. I might be getting
AOV was like 500, 600 or something.
Yeah. Something like that. Yeah. I think the order value was 511 on that. Yeah.
How, so I want to pick apart a couple pieces of this. One would be like, how did you write your sales emails? You created frameworks. What was the framework for your selling emails?
Oh, I probably couldn't walk through the whole framework, but like the way that we thought about it was, what's the best story? Like, what are the things that we want to front load that people are going to want to know right away, right? So for me, it's like, what is it? What problem does it solve? Who does it solve the problem for? Who doesn't it solve the problem for? Why am I worth listening to? Those were some of the things that we thought we should put in the front, right? We also wanted to tell this story and to really allow our personalization to get its sort of hooks into them. And for people by the 6th or 7th email to be like, damn, like this product sounds like it's just for me. It solves exactly the problem I have for the exact business I have on the exact platform that I want to use, right? So if we could do those, let's say 4, 5, 6 different things really effectively, we knew it was time for us to suggest the pricing. And we had built it up so that we assumed, and we probably shouldn't have assumed this. This was probably a mistake, but it worked out anyways. We assumed people would think, oh, this is going to be a $2,500 course or $1,000 and so when we hit them with like the lowest you can get in during this 5-day window at a minimum for $400, and oh, by the way, there's purchase power parity if you're in a different country. Like, I think that really stunned people. So our goal was to really slam this 5-day window period and to say, yep, this is the right course for you for sure. It's less than you thought it was going to be, but it's only less than you thought it was going to be for this very small window. We thought we told that story very effectively, and that was, I think, the most important thing for us.
Yeah, there's this. I think most people, if they can, should do some kind. They call them like open cart, closed cart sales, right? There's a finite period where you sell, and you may bring the product back in a way that is evergreen. You're always going to sell it a month, 2 months, 3 months later. But by doing the open closed cart, you get this lever you wouldn't otherwise have, which is there are different types of urgency that you can build. You can build urgency through scarcity, right? There's only going to be so many people. You can build urgency by time gating. There's only so much time. And those emails, I mean, we'll do sales drops for people, and like sales will kind of be this U. So there's a lot of sales in the beginning, and then it'll kind of drop off. And those last 48 hours, that last day,
exactly,
you may make as much in sales on your last day as your first one. It's a huge lever.
It's exactly what happened for us, right? We exploded out of the gates. things got quiet over maybe like the middle part, right? It's like a reverse bell curve, right? And so that's exactly what happened to us, or an upside down bell curve. And in the last like hour, I think we made like 15% of our sales or 20%. It's wild how people wait so long. To me, it's just because I'm the opposite of that. I buy when things first come out, and I'm just like, I don't want to wait any longer. I'm just going to buy this. But like a lot,
I'm totally the opposite. It's like the last hour, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to do it.
I'm back like 5 hours later, and they're like, oh, I missed it, and I was like, you had 5 days, dude. Like we try not to make any exceptions for that, because then it kind of ruins the idea of urgency and time gating. But yeah, it was much more of a successful launch than I had anticipated.
Were there other decisions you made in the structure that you think contributed? So we have like A/B test, collecting the data up front. So not rushing into the sale, actually saying we're going to get the first party data. We're going to do this segmentation. You have a very story-driven series of emails. You're doing the open cart thing. These are like really important decisions. Were there any other decisions like that?
Part of what we did, and I can't necessarily attribute like a rise in conversion to this, right? This is more like a hypothesis that I have, was we left a few of the questions with open answers, like other, and we let people free text in. And so at this point, there was the very beginning of AI, right? So like I was able to pipe some of that data into I think what was like the first or second version of ChatGPT, and get a lot of good learnings that we interspersed across some of the last pieces of email copy that helped us come up with some of the frequently asked questions during the launch. It helped us tighten up the fascinations on the marketing copy on the landing page. There was a lot of stuff that we did just using reader language. Like part of what I learned at Patient Pop and ZocDoc was to talk to the doctors like they wanted to be talked to, and to use their language and how they describe their pain. And I've never forgotten that as a salesperson or a marketer. And so I think that was something that we did really effectively.
I like that. There's one other nugget I want to pull out, because I think people should know that. So you flying to Brennan, I think is like pretty cool. And I think there's this concept of like, when you do these kinds of sales, or frankly anything in life, like I think there's a certain period where you really want to be all in. So like
Sure.
I've done multiple things with Jesse or Andrew or other people where I go down to St. Louis, or I go to Austin where Andrew is. And I think that's, it's important. Being in person, I think is a really important component, and being all in for a small period of time.
100% agree. It's a very little price to pay for getting things right.
Yeah. So you've talked about like, you see your life as kind of going through these acts, right? These sort of phases. And you've been doing this now for 5 or 6 years. You've talked about a lot of those phases being 5 years. Mm-hmm. And so I guess the question I want to kind of just jam with you on is like, is this what's next? Is there a new phase coming?
I mean, right now I'm sort of doing this other thing that I'm really interested in, which is I opened a membership on Substack. I wanted a place to write creatively, just for the sake of writing creatively, for getting some of my like non-tactical business content out of my brain. So like, the Saturday Solopreneur is 180 issues deep or something like that, 170 or 60 or something like that. And like, it's all really tactical business stuff. And like, after a while, I guess some people are, they can write about like landing page conversion and email copy for like their whole lives. And for that, I salute them. I get a little bit bored of that stuff. And so I've started to write about sort of the intersection of life and business. How do you build a life you love and support that with a business that you enjoy? So I've been doing that on Substack under a new newsletter called Unsubscribe. And built a little membership around that of about 900 folks who are, in this little, it's not really a community. It's more of a kind of a membership where we can chat. We have weekly live Q&As. We do some workshops. I fly around the country. We do in-person networking events because I really wanted to bring the in-person, just like we talked about with Brennan, back into this mix. I've missed being around smart, enthusiastic, energetic people. And so that's kind of what I'm working on right now. I think if you look into the future, I'll probably at some point do a pretty massive sabbatical. That's my goal, right? Like I look at people like, Tim Ferriss, who was able to take a really long sabbatical, and like, I wouldn't necessarily consider him like a constant theme on the internet much anymore. Maybe he is much more than I am aware of, but like, I don't want to be on the internet as much anymore. I don't find the need to like grow. I'm not interested in, this is not a SaaS business. I don't care about month over month, quarter over quarter, year over year growth. I care about paying my bills, saving and investing. That's what I care about. And so as long as my wife and I can do that, we're good. And we've been fortunate enough to have some success where it puts us in a financial position where we might be able to take some time off. And I don't think that I ever want to stop sharing my thoughts or being creative, but to have to show up every single day in order to drive the business forward becomes tiring over time. And so I think what I'll probably do at some point in time is take a pretty major sabbatical and sit around and figure out what comes to me. I think I have to make space for what's next. I don't think I can think of what's next. I think I have to make space for it. And so I think that's what's next for me, is making space for that voice, I guess.
Yeah, I these kind of like, we talked earlier about these like slingshot, moments. So like I used to be very heavy actually as a kid. I was like maybe 200 pounds when I was 13. I had this slingshot of like running up and down the stairs for 30 minutes every day for 7 months. I lost like 50 pounds, all this stuff. I'm a big fan of, my work version of that is sabbaticals. And I'm a big fan of that. I actually, you were talking a second ago about like, I think purchase parity in the products. I think you do like what country you're in, right? Will define like what price you get. I bought something from you. I was in Thailand, which is how I know about that thing.
Yeah.
I was on a sabbatical, with my buddy Will. And that's where I saw that. But that was like, it was like 30 days. It was such an important recharge, and it gave me energy for like what I wanted to do next. And I think it's like a critical thing. What's your version of a sabbatical going to be? Have you thought about it?
Yeah, I have. I've lived in the US my whole life, minus my wife and I spent last winter in Paris for 90 days, which we very much enjoyed. And we're going to go spend this winter in Lisbon, which I'm really looking forward to. I've been there a few times and I enjoy it. But for me, it's immersing myself in a completely different way of living. I live up, as you and I have discussed, I live up in the Catskill Mountains, north of New York City. So it's quiet. And like, sure, I could take a sabbatical here. It feels like that would be the right thing in most people's minds for a sabbatical. It's quiet, it's peaceful, you get some, but like I actually get nervous and anxious in quiet. I feel much more at ease in a thriving city. Like that's where I feel at ease. I feel at ease around intelligent people having big conversations in rooms with lots of folks, like thinking about big goals. And I'm not saying I want to stack my sabbatical with like lots of work talk. I don't. But what I'd really like to do is get off the internet for a little while, not have to create for the sake of creating for business, right? To kind of let my creativity flow back into me and fill up, almost like it's filling up my entire body, and then go expose myself to a new culture in a new city, in a new country where there's lots of interesting people that I haven't met before, and learn how they think, what's on their brain, what are they thinking about, what are they working on, and just being involved in small and interesting ways where it can maybe kick up or spark an idea for me. And that's what I really want to do. And rather than 30 or 60 days, like my big goal would be able to kind of do that for 2 years.
Wow. And would you be offline during that period? Like, would you still do content, or do you say,
No,
no,
I think I would be offline during that, which by the way, like, I'm a realistic person. Like I think that would render me pretty irrelevant being away for 2 years. But I'm not super scared of irrelevancy. I have confidence in myself that I can emerge and do something offline, or that doesn't require a creator brand or a personal brand. And so I might not do that, right? Like these are things that are floating in my head all the time, but like I know deep down inside that having a 2-year break to creatively recharge, I believe would put me in a position to succeed in 2028 for many, many years after 2029, whatever that might be.
Yeah. You're talking about kind of confidence. I think something you've said before is you have what you feel is like Jekyll and Hyde confidence.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah, it's funny. I said that in another podcast. So really good research. The way that I am, the way that I operate as a person is like, if you meet me on a normal day and you ask me like, do I feel secure about the future or about my ability to be successful in business? Like, I will say yes, of course. Like there is no indicators. If I took all my accomplishments, put them on a piece of paper and took my name off and handed it to myself and said, do you think this person will be successful in the future? The answer would be objectively yes. There are days that I have where I something bad happens and I'm convinced that everything is going away, right? Like where the show is over, everything is falling apart. And on those days, I'm convinced I'll never do anything successfully again. And I think that that is an odd way to think. But I get that from other folks in my family who think relatively similarly. So I've kind of inherited that, I think, and have to deal with it.
Why do you think that happens? Because I've had this. You and I both have friends who have experienced this. Because it's crazy when you think about it. Like everything is fine,
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think it's just like I think it's a blessing and a curse. Like when I have a down day, like let's say for me, revenue is pretty constant, which is actually interesting and odd in an info product business. But my revenue is pretty constant. I know about at knock on wood, 8 a.m., noon, 4 p.m. I know kind of where revenue should be if things are kind of operating. And when everything's going well, feel pretty hunky dory about that. There will be a day twice a month where like things are way off, right? And I'm not good at saying like, it happens. Like I am action oriented. Leap in, figure out the problem, form a hypothesis and execute against it and fix it. That's what made me, I think, a good sales leader and why I never missed targets when I was a revenue leader. But after a while, like that can wear on you. And so I think it's both a blessing and a curse. It gets you really down and really scared and really anxious, but it also kicks you into action. I've never been laissez-faire. Like I've never been like the kind of guy who's just like, oh, so what? Like, lost my job or,
you were the fixer. You were running around the country. Dude, you were the fixer. Yeah.
When something's broken, I want to fix it. And I hate it and I love it. My wife would say I'm a crazy person, but I think I'm a relatively normal human being.
There's this, I described it as kind of like, I don't mean this in a pejorative way. I'm this way. There's like I don't think there's a sickness of ambition, which is like, it's the reason why people do things so well. And you have such you go into painstaking detail about your funnel and how you think about sales and your writing, but it's also this thing that causes you to even when everything is amazing, or something just goes a little awry just on the day. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't matter, but it feels like it matters in the moment. One thing, I don't know if you do this. I've started to try to do this more. Super simple. If you just like make like a GPT of like your finances and stuff. I think I saw this on My First Million, and so I started doing it. And you take like 3% or whatever the thing is. So if you sell 1.5% of your stocks, and let's say you get 1 to 1.5% in dividends from your stocks, and you just do that math, and you can do a little Zapier Gumloop thing that will just email that to you like once a month. You get this kind of like, it's nice. It like makes you, oh wow, my income like could never go below that, even if everything went away to zero. It's a nice safety thing. I've found that to be quite nice.
Yeah, I'm not lying when I tell you this. I've probably run that analysis 500 times because I get really intense about that, and like I want to know at this budget, at this withdrawal rate, at this inflation rate. I run Monte Carlo simulations. I use Rich Broker Dead. Like I've run at least 500 Monte Carlo simulations.
Oh, never mind. All right, so I was doing the first grader version.
Yeah, no, like I'll take every combination of the stock market across 45 years or whatever it is, should you start no matter what year, including the Great Depression. And like, there are days when my wife will wake up and like, I've been up since 5 a.m. and I'm like wild eyed and like full of coffee and like have a bunch of reports I can't wait to show her. And she's like, please leave me alone. I just got up. So yeah, I guess in that way I am a crazy person, but so she wins on that one. But
what are you looking to get out of the sabbatical? Like what would an amazing sabbatical, what would you answer about yourself? What would you learn in the sabbatical?
That's a really good question. I think there's a couple things. I think one is like a lot of what I write. Like I write a lot about the intersection of life and business, and so people come to me and they're like, "Dude, you've got this figured out, man. Like that's so cool." And it's like, it's the opposite, right? Like I write as self therapy. I think people think that people write about what they've figured out. And I write about things I haven't figured out. And I write about things I want to figure out, or things that I've gotten slightly better at and I'm still struggling with. And so like, I'd like to take all the things that I write about and make them more of a concrete reality to say, I have done that, or I have fixed that, or I've gone from a C plus to a B minus in that. And it's almost like, I want to retrain my mind and body during this sabbatical to think differently, to not be this yo-yo sort of up and down, right? Those are things that I struggle with personally. I think another thing is to explore creative hobbies. So if you ask me what I like to do, I like to write, and I like to work, and I like to walk and go out to dinner and things. But like, I don't paint, I don't draw, I don't do theater, I don't sculpt, I don't, there's sort of, I don't attend a lot of comedy shows like I used to do when I was younger. Like, there are so many things I want to get back to doing. And because of that binary thinking, that 0 and 1, like, I'm really bad in that gray area. And I want to retrain myself to be more like I was maybe in my early 20s. And then maybe last but not least, like, I want to really kind of immerse myself in a different culture. I'm really interested in, and there's plenty of problems, of course, over there, and no place is perfect, but I'm really interested in sort of the European lifestyle. I read when I was younger, something that stuck with me was like, if you want to learn how to make money, live in America. If you want to learn how to live in Europe, something to that effect. And so I'd like to go over there and bring my American sort of thoughts and spirits to a different place and see, like, what am I missing, right? Like what are the other ways to live, and how do people do that? And I've always enjoyed immersing myself in different thoughts and cultures. And the best thing I can think is that I don't know. I know nothing. And so, letting other people show me how they live and work, I think would be a really brilliant spend of 2 years.
Yeah, my takeaway from that, and this, I think it's like a horizontal thing people could apply, anywhere, is it's important to like understand the menu. So like your version of that right now, right in your life, is like, cool, let's just see how somebody else lives. Like, are there things they think about or do day I don't even know to think about? We had the same conversation when you and I were talking about the sales playbook for somebody. And it's the same, you see that again and again. I think even in the way that you write in this new community that you're doing, I think for many people, myself included, it's important to see people talk about the shit that doesn't go well, the self-doubt, like hearing that on Sam's podcast, or hearing that from like Jesse or like other friends, like just hearing, oh, wow, there are these incredible people that have made it and they don't feel like they know what they're doing. There's kind of a like, oh man, I guess it's going to be all okay. Right?
Yeah, I hope so.
We're all just trying to figure this shit out.
Yeah, I agree with that, man. I totally agree.
Cool, man. Well, I appreciate you doing this. This is a lot of fun, and I'm excited for this sabbatical. It sounds amazing.
Cool, Nathan. Thanks so much for the time, man. I appreciate it. Great questions, and really enjoyed the interview.